Help us.
One trillion species, 7.8 billion humans, 1.9 million species extinct, one planet. Where are we heading? What should we do?
Watch Climate Tracker, only on WION. World is one.
From the world's most volatile region, conflicts over faith and boundaries. Stories of death, destruction, despair, and hope. WION brings you to the heart of the action. Incisive analysis.
There are many other
Hello everyone and welcome to WION Live broadcast from New York. I'm Susan Tehrani. Here are the top stories we're following this hour. Russia lashes out on massive US aid to Ukraine, saying US fighting an indirect war in the country as Zelensky raised his call for aid, divisions over support for the war in focus. Donald Trump in the headlines once again. The January 6th committee is set to release its final report on his handling and in his hand in fomenting the Capitol Hill riots. The UN Security Council adopts its first resolution on Myanmar in 74 years and demands an end to violence and urges the military to release all political prisoners, including Aung San Suu Kyi. It could be the coldest Christmas in the U.S. in 4 decades. Winter weather alerts sounded as major storm sweeps the country, affecting over 90 million people. And as nations around the world celebrate the Christmas spirit, glimpses of Santa spreading cheer in Jerusalem. Russia has said the U.S. and Ukraine were turning a deaf ear to the Kremlin's concerns. Russia's defense minister Dmitry Peskov hit out, saying the U.S. is continuing its line of de facto fighting an indirect war with Russia. Hitting out on Zelensky's U.S. visit, Peskov said that not a word was spoken on a readiness to listening to Russia's concerns.
Продолжаются поставки вооружений, расширяется номенклатура поставляемых вооружений. Все это, безусловно, ведет к усугублению конфликта и, собственно, не сулит ничего хорошего Украине.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow would continue to develop its military potential and the combat readiness of its nuclear forces. The U.S. announced an additional $1.85 billion in military aid and sharing of the Patriot missile with Ukraine during President Volodymyr Zelensky's day-long visit to Washington. In his address to the U.S. Congress, Zelensky thanked the U.S. for aid and emphasized on how U.S. assistance for Ukraine is not a charity, but an investment in security. This pitch comes in the backdrop of calls for a, quote, just peace. The fact that even within the U.S., there are visible divides between lawmakers on billions spent on military aid to Ukraine, and not to forget concerns raised by Italy on spending on the war and the British Prime Minister's call for an audit as well. Okay, to make sense of all of this, we are joined by a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, Elizabeth Braw. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us on WION. What is the reaction to Zelensky's so-called sales pitch here in the United States, and what level of support is there for the Ukraine conflict at this point?
It was extraordinary to see the scenes in Congress yesterday. I don't think anybody would have expected this sort of rapturous welcome of Zelensky, especially because, as you mentioned in your intro, there have been calls among some Republican lawmakers in particular, either already in Congress or ones just elected in the midterms, to curtail aid to Ukraine, or at least to not increase it further. But if we judging from the welcome he received in Congress, there's virtually unanimous support. Obviously, it's much easier to stand up and applaud than it is to then send weapons and money. But nevertheless, it was an extremely warm welcome before he spoke, and then again, rapturous applause during his speech. And that really matters because, as you mentioned, the tide has turned a bit in the US. It's easy to support the war early on, but when it drags on, people will just get tired. They will get war fatigue. And that's what Zelensky is trying to attack by visiting Washington. And of course, Washington being the most important capital supporting Ukraine.
Very true. And also, there is an increasingly visible divide among Republicans and some progressive Democrats on, the question of how long is too long for the United States to sort of send this kind of blank check, the way they put it, to Ukraine and not talk about some kind of resolution and an end to the conflict. Where is all of this headed?
That's what we'll see when the new Congress takes place. So this is the outgoing Congress, or House of Representatives in particular, has been newly elected, and the new members will take seats in January. Of course, most of them will have sat in this Congress, but there are a number of new ones, some of a Trumpian mindset, and some, as you say, on the rather more progressive wing, the so-called progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And this is really an extraordinary alliance of war doubters, let's call them, people on the far left of the Democratic Party and Trumpian Republicans who are saying, for different reasons, that the U.S. should try to convince Ukraine to settle for some sort of peace. And it's not the majority, but they are loud enough to have made a dent in the public debate, which is what it was so important, clearly, for Zelensky to come here in person to Washington to deliver his call for more assistance. And the argument he made was that this is not just about Ukraine; it's about international security. It's an investment in international security. And I think on that point he is right, because if Ukraine were to not fully be able to keep the territory it had before the 24th of February, then that would signal to Russia and indeed other countries that you can take other countries' territory and you will be able to keep it.
Elizabeth Braw from the American Enterprise Institute, thank you so much for joining us on WION. One more push to try to punish former President Donald Trump. The House January 6th Select Committee made 34 transcripts of witness testimony gathered from its investigation public. The final report is likely to be released on Thursday. Most of the witnesses primarily exercised their Fifth Amendment rights, however, to not answer any questions. The transcripts, nevertheless, shed light on the scope of evidence obtained by this committee. The final report is a culmination of a year-and-a-half long of work, including hundreds of depositions and hundreds of thousands of documents and other material evidence. The 8-chapter report is expected to hone in on Donald Trump's alleged role in the violence at the Capitol, as well as his efforts to overturn the 2020 U.S. presidential elections. Heat on Donald Trump from the House's January 6th committee comes in the backdrop of findings of massive fraud in Trump's income declarations. The report reveals that Trump, in his federal tax returns, declared negative income in 2015, 16, 17, and in 2020. After weeks of tough negotiations with religious and far-right coalition partners, Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that he has succeeded in securing a deal to form a government in Israel. It will be the most right-wing coalition in Israel's history. Netanyahu made the announcement on Twitter minutes before the midnight deadline set by President Isaac Herzog. The announcement came after Netanyahu's conservative Likud party and like-minded religious nationalist parties close to the ultra-Orthodox and West Bank settled communities won a comfortable majority in the November 1st election, promising him 64 of Parliament's 120 seats. But the agreement to form a government was held up by disputes over a package of proposed legislation on issues ranging from planning authority in the West Bank to ministerial control over the police. The new government, which Netanyahu must now present within a week, will take office after a year that has seen the worst level of violence in the West Bank in more than a decade, with over 150 parliamentarians, that is Palestinians, and more than 20 Israelis killed.
רציתי להודיע לך שבזכות התמיכה הציבורית האדירה שזכינו לה בבחירות, עלה בידי להרכיב ממשלה שתדאג לכל אזרחי ישראל, ואני מתכוון כמובן להקים אותה בהקדם האפשרי.
Israel will finally get a stable government after a turbulent period that saw Israelis go to the polls 5 times in less than 4 years. But the weeks of negotiations have made it clear that the coalition may still face significant internal tensions. Netanyahu has said that he will ultimately set the Israeli policy and has pledged to govern in the interest of all citizens of Israel. But the inclusion of the hardliners in the government has shocked Palestinians and liberal Israelis. Reports say Ben-Gvir of the Jewish Power Party is set to serve as security minister with authority over the police. He is an extremist politician known for his anti-Arab rhetoric. He was once convicted of incitement to racism and supporting a terrorist organization. Bezalel Smotrich of the far-right Religious Zionism Party believes Israel should annex the occupied territory. He is set to get the control over planning in the West Bank, giving him wide power over the lives of Palestinians. Another far-right ally, Avi Maoz, is the head of an anti-LGBTQ party. He will reportedly be placed in control of parts of the country's national education system. Aryeh Debri, head of the religious Shas party, is bidding to become finance minister. This despite a conviction for tax fraud. Netanyahu, who is returning after serving a record 15 years in top office, is on trial for corruption charges that he denies. In its first resolution against Myanmar in 74 years, the United Nations Security Council urged the country's military junta to end violence and free ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi and other political prisoners. The Southeast Asian country has witnessed crisis after a military coup deposed Suu Kyi's government in February 2021. 12 members of the UN Security Council voted in favor of the resolution, demanding an immediate end to violence in Myanmar, while China, Russia, and India abstained from the vote. The 15-member council has long been divided over the Myanmar crisis due to China and Russia's stance. On Wednesday, the UN resolution expressed deep concern at the continuing state of emergency imposed by the military and its grave impact on Myanmar's people. The resolution urged concrete and immediate action to implement a peace plan agreed by the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations known as ASEAN. It also issued a call to uphold democratic institutions and processes to pursue constructive dialogue and reconciliation in accordance with the will and interests of the people.
We have adopted the first Security Council resolution on the situation in Myanmar. It is the result of many weeks of careful consultation with Council members, with ASEAN members, and with other key regional partners. In February 2021, the military overturned the results of a democratic election, seized power, and plunged Myanmar and its 55 million people into a series of cascading crises: humanitarian, economic, and political. The coup has had negative consequences for the region and its stability.
Myanmar has witnessed widespread civic unrest as people protest Suu Kyi's removal and the military rule. 77-year-old Suu Kyi has been a prisoner since the army toppled her government almost 2 years ago and violently cracked down on dissent. According to a local monitoring group, the military's crackdown on pro-democracy protests has killed more than 2,500 people in Myanmar. The military has alleged widespread voter fraud during the November 2020 election. That was won by Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party. Although international observers said the elections were largely free and fair, a junta court has found the Nobel Peace Prize laureate guilty on every one of the 14 charges it has heard so far, including corruption, and jailed her for 26 years. Until now, the UN Security Council had only agreed formal statements on Myanmar, where the army also led a 2017 crackdown on Rohingya Muslims that was described by the United States as quote-unquote a genocide. The only other resolution adopted by the Security Council was in 1948, when the body recommended the UN General Assembly admit Myanmar, which was Burma then, as a member of the world body.
我愿就中方投票立场做如下说明。第一，缅甸问题没有速效解决办法。
Sam Bankman-Fried, founder of the collapsed cryptocurrency exchange FTX, has reportedly landed in New York. He was extradited from the Bahamas to face charges of fraud in relation to his firm and its contributions to election campaigns in the United States. Bankman-Fried is likely to appear before a U.S. federal court in Manhattan later today. He is expected to be arraigned on the 8 counts he faces, including wire fraud, money laundering, and campaign finance violations. Bankman-Fried was arrested on a U.S. extradition request last week in the Bahamas. His firm, FTX, is also based in the Bahamas itself. He initially said that he would contest extradition, but soon revised his decision. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors said 2 former associates of Sam Bankman-Fried had pleaded guilty to charges, adding that were now cooperating with the government. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams said that Caroline Ellison, former CEO of Alameda Research, and Gary Wang, co-founder of FTX, have pleaded guilty to defrauding investors in the crypto trading platform.
Last week, we announced charges against Samuel Bankman-Fried for a sweeping fraud scheme that contributed to FTX's collapse, and for a campaign finance scheme that sought to influence public policy in Washington. As I said last week, this investigation is very much ongoing, and it's moving very quickly. I also said that last week's announcement would not be our last, and let me be clear once again, neither is today's. I want to make 2 announcements. First, I'm announcing that the Southern District of New York has filed charges against Caroline Ellison, the former CEO of Alameda Research, and Gary Wang, a co-founder of FTX, in connection with their roles in the frauds that contributed to FTX's collapse. Both Ms. Ellison and Mr. Wang have pled guilty to those charges, and they are both cooperating with the Southern District of New York.
The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has also charged Ellison and Wang for their roles in a multi-year scheme to defraud equity investors of FTX. Federal prosecutors in Manhattan last week charged Bankman-Fried with stealing billions of dollars in FTX customer assets. They said the money was used to plug losses at his hedge fund, Alameda Research. U.S. Attorney Williams has called out one of the biggest financial frauds in American history. The 30-year-old cryptocurrency mogul has acknowledged risk management failures at FTX. He has, however, maintained that he does not believe he has criminal liability. Bankman-Fried rode a crypto boom to become a billionaire. He soon became an influential U.S. political donor. All of this was lost within a week, as before FTX's crash wiped out his wealth and tarnished his reputation. The collapse was driven by a wave of customer withdrawals amid concerns over commingling of funds with Alameda. The $32 billion exchange declared bankruptcy on November 11th. It could be the coldest Christmas in 4 decades for the U.S. This as a major winter storm sweeping the U.S. More than 90 million people from Washington state to Maryland are under a winter weather alert. As a winter weather bomb cyclone, an unofficial term for a powerful, rapidly strengthening storm, is headed towards the U.S., likely to disrupt holiday and travel plans as it gets busy. About 80% of the nation is set to experience sub-zero temperatures, including places as far south as Texas. The National Weather Service has warned that wind chills could plunge to 0 degrees in Portland, Oregon, and could potentially plummet to 25 degrees below zero in parts of the Cascades in northern Oregon and southern Washington states. Those mountainous areas could receive up to 5 inches of snow and nearly ½ an inch of ice.
We see about 4 or 5 times a year where we actually reach overnight temps of 25 degrees or lower. So when we're seeing temps of 15 and wind chills of like -1 and -5, that really shows you how rare this is. I think in my 7.5 years living in the Pacific Northwest and specifically here in Multnomah County area, I don't remember a specific instance where I can remember temperatures quite this low.
Portlanders are not always great about being prepared. You know, they look for ice melt when there's 4 inches of snow on the ground. And this is one time they're really taking it to heart. They've been coming in and buying faucet covers. They've been buying ice melt. They've been buying snow shovels. The things you need for emergency, pipe insulation.
The snow and the freezing temperatures through Washington state created some hazardous travel conditions, with road crews working nonstop to keep the streets and highways clear for travelers across the state. The street crews stayed on duty as the snow fell throughout the night. But despite working around the clock to clear off the streets, slush and ice still made for dangerous driving as far north as the Canadian border. The storm is causing many disruptions. Some places saw 15 inches of snow from over the past 2 days. Whatcom County, Washington, had fierce winds that led to snow drifts around the town of Linden. Americans in the upper Midwestern U.S. and Great Lakes region have been advised to secure enough food, water, and essential medications to last at least 3 days. In case of a blizzard warning, residents have been asked to stay home and wait until the warnings have passed. The National Weather Service have further passed instructions on safety measures to be adopted by people, whether indoors or outdoors. A massive winter storm is expected to bring icy temperatures, howling winds, and blizzard conditions to vast swaths of the U.S. and parts of Canada in time for the holiday season, with a few airlines already issuing waivers to passengers in anticipation of bad weather. It seems that for many, delays and missed flights could be a major spoil sport this festive season. We leave you with these visuals from Jerusalem, where Santa came through old city walls, delivering holiday cheers and Christmas trees to the residents.
Merry Christmas!
Hello, Loti. Oh, is that right? Merry Christmas to everybody. Oh, whoa, ho. All right, Santa.
For this news desk, live from New York, I'm Susan Teherani. Thank you for staying with us and watching, but don't go away. There is still more news and headlines coming up on WION World is One.
WION.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
It's code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. Wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God help us all. If you fail to prove us wrong, God help us.
One trillion species. 7.8 billion humans. 1.9 million species extinct. One planet. Where are we heading? What should we do?
Watch Climate Tracker, only on WION. World is One.